Hello and welcome to the HGC or Hardcore Giveaway and Gamers Club channel. My name is Daniel and today's repair is a PS4 DualShock controller. Obviously the analog stick is all jacked up. Anyway, it's a weekend. I'm trying to catch up on repairs. Normally don't work on the weekends, but figured I would get them out of the way. Had two of them, and on the second one decided I'd video it. Just so you know, I got a lot of giveaways. Go check out the active giveaways playlist and ignore anybody in the background talking. It's a weekend and they never give me a second's peace to make videos without somebody in the background. Anyway, Phillips screwdriver, remove 4 screws. The back does not come off the easiest on these, but if you pinch a little bit on the back side of the controller and use a spudger, you can separate it. Once you get it to a certain point, just slide it down in there and then start on the other side. Sorry, I'm a little out of center here. Okay, and I am narrating after the fact. Couldn't figure out where I left my spudger, so I wound up getting a pick tool that I use from time to time with the electronics. There it is. Okay, so once you get the right and the left opened up to a certain point, you can pretty much just pry it open. You notice I switched it back over to the spudger. Alright, so liberal pull and these will pop right open. You gotta be a little on the careful side. You don't want to knock off the left and right trigger buttons. You always want to take your time. I'm going to move this mic. There you go. Sound of the computer tends to put a whine in the background. Alright, once you get it open, excuse me, you'll see a ribbon cable that goes to the motherboard that just unplugs. And then you can see your battery, circuit board, and rumblers. So all we need to do is unplug that and set that off to the side. And the battery come right out. So will the mount for the battery. So just unplug the battery and then remove the battery mount plug and all, and set that off over to the side. Now, there's no difference in the lengths of the first 4 screws, just so you know. You'll see a ribbon retainer and ribbon right here at the upper right. That you'll have to remove that. A pair of tweezers is nice, but you can use your fingernail. And you'll notice a lot of this video is going to be a little out of focus. Working with such small things, it's almost impossible to hold the camera, and I'm just making sure the trigger mechanisms are all in place and not falling out. It's real hard to hold the camera and do this at the same time. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and unsolder the rumblers from the board. This can make this job a lot easier. Take a pair of tweezers, soldering iron, and just tap right on it. On these, on one side it's going to be black and red, and then on the other side it'll be red and black. One side will be red to positive, the other side will be black to positive. So pay attention to which side's which. If you're going to try and do this yourself, I recommend you take a picture of that before you go any further. And I recommend you watch this entire video before you go any further, because it's a little over an hour long. The only thing I edited out of this video was the breaks I took. So you'll get to see every last problematic issue with repairing these controllers, and you'll realize why I avoid doing them and don't like doing them. Alright, so if you're having trouble with it walking or drifting and you need to replace an analog stick, I would highly recommend you buy two. Replace both sides, otherwise you're going to wind up with one loose and floppy and the other one all tight and new. And you're just better off all the way around going ahead and replacing both. Okay, so once you remove the screw to remove the circuit board, you're going to remove the whole inner frame very carefully, because you don't want to drop all your buttons on the inside. It's not really all that hard, but the ribbon cable at the top does tend to get a little bit in the way. You might have to kind of tuck that in. Sometimes it'll come right out, sometimes it won't. And then it will come apart just like that. Really easy. It's just a slow manipulation. Make sure all your buttons are in place and didn't fall out. If they did, put them back. They're real simple. There's the analog stick controller. I had to pull that out of there. Alright. So now we got this separated. We're going to remove the circuit board, and we're going to set that off to the side and put this over with everything else. And remove the old analog button that's all torn up too, both sides, so I'm going to go ahead and replace them as well. But we need to replace both of the analog sticks on this board. So let the fun begin. Okay, so on these, there's so many different solder points. I recommend that you got to desolder. I recommend that you take a spudger and separate the blue variable resistors, which is what actually gives the signals of whether you're up or down or right or left. Go ahead and remove them from it. Now let's just see me do it here, and you see me showing you what I was going to do with the spudger. So take the corner of the spudger and stick it in and just give it a little twist. Stick the spudger in, give you a little twist. There you go. Alright. This makes it a little bit easier to take the components off, although this is in no way a fun task or a quick and easy fix. As you'll see, sometimes these go really quick and everything is just easy as pie. Other times, like this one, I mean the first one I did it probably in about 20 minutes. This one right here took a whole lot longer because I had issue after issue with it not wanting to free the pins. Usually the desoldering iron will desolder the points very nice and easy, and other times it will remove the solder, but there's still enough on them to be a pain, and if you don't get it all out on the first try, it's going to be a pain taking everything apart. So I'm using an electric desoldering iron here. Basically I'll hold it in an angle until I see the solder turn liquid, and then raise up and pull the trigger, suck all the solder off the board. Give it a little twirly twist at the same time, which normally will remove all the solder and separate the pin. Sometimes these things will just fall right out when you're doing. Other times they don't want to, like this time. You'll see. I had a major headache with this particular board, as I had to very carefully manipulate out all of the legs, even though I removed the majority of the solder with the desoldering iron to start with. You definitely want to use a desoldering iron as opposed to a solder braid. Works a lot better, and solder braids, although will remove a lot of solder, sometimes you can get them stuck to it, or the heat from the solder braid extending over can potentially hit another component, and because it gets hot just like your soldering iron, cause it to knock off a small resistor or capacitor or anything nearby. Yeah, I'm drinking a Pepsi. Oh, I think I probably mentioned this earlier in the video, but you guys should definitely go check out my active giveaways playlist. I give away roughly about $100 a month in game systems, other various electronics. Usually post them up way in advance. Probably have the remainder of the year for all of my giveaways posted up within the next couple of weeks to months. But right now I know I'm at least 4 or 5 months in advance on all of my giveaways, and will be continuing to post more giveaways because I got a few more things I want to give away. And all you got to do is watch one of them giveaway videos, post a comment in it, and you're automatically entered. If you want to help me spread the word about my giveaways, to help me give away more stuff, because the more people coming in and trying for the giveaways, the more I could actually give away. If you put up a video on your channel that is advertising my channel and my giveaways, well, then I will give you one entry in every single one of my giveaways, whether you show up on it or not. If you win something that you don't want, you could always donate it back and I'll give it away. The whole idea is to get electronics and game systems and stuff like that into the hands of people who can't really afford to buy them, or wouldn't normally buy it for themselves just because they don't want to justify the money, or can't. Now, if you got money, that doesn't mean you can't win them. My giveaways are for everybody. However, if you do got a little bit of money and you're willing to help me get electronics into the hands of kids that can't afford them, or at least give them the opportunity to get electronics that can't afford them, then consider becoming a member. There's a video on the Active Giveaways playlist that talks about membership and what that's all about. Okay, so right now we're just going through and removing the solder. Wait till it becomes a little liquid and raise it up and suck it off. That sounded nasty. Alright, so this is going to be a really long and boring video. If you want to watch the whole thing or skip around, that's perfectly fine. But I didn't edit this on purpose, and I left out all of the problems in the video for a very specific reason. One, so you know what you're getting into. A lot of these videos put up, they're only showing you the little bits and pieces of after they've already had all of their issues and everything got desoldered, and then they quickly pretend like they desoldered it and then go on with the video, and you wind up with a 5 or 10 minute video of a repair replacing these ports, making it seem like you can actually do it very easily. And then when you go out and you buy your soldering iron and some tweezers and all that other stuff, you wind up destroying your board and spending weeks on it, getting frustrated until you get to the point where you take a hammer and beat the heck out of not only the controller but the soldering iron and everything in the room, and then go buy yourself a new controller. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm taking a spudger and I was putting a little separating pressure between the analog stick and the casing. This casing absorbs a lot of the heat from the soldering iron, so it takes a while for the heat to build up in there and enough to liquefy the solder in it. So once that happens, because it's got 4 legs, you're going to have to very carefully heat it up, slide the leg out a little ways, and then go to the next leg and do that. You'll go back and forth a couple of times until both of the front legs are free, and then you'll work, or I should say one of the front legs are free and one of the front legs is mostly out, and then there will be 4 more pins off to the left that you'll have to very carefully manipulate out if you don't have a desoldering iron. And they're right there where I'm trying to put that spudger in there, and just trying to stay within the video where you can see what I'm doing. So this obviously took a little longer than normal because I'm trying to have everything where you can see it and where I'm doing it. Alright, so I pulled the front 2 legs from the housing of the analog stick out a little bit. So now I'm working on 4 smaller pins that are just off to the right, which is also part of that, and I need to manipulate them out a little bit so that I can release the front leg more. See how it's slowly starting to come up in the front? Okay. And then we get my little pick tool back in here a little bit. We're going to give it a little bit of prying pressure, and then we're going to heat up one of the front legs again, and then some of the 4 contacts, and you're just going to slowly, real carefully go around and heat it up, pry the leg out a little ways and go to the next one, and then pry the leg out a little ways and then go to the next one and pry the leg out a little ways until we get the whole thing. Now, we could potentially use a hot air gun, but there's a lot of very small plastic parts nearby. Yeah, we could shield them with a little bit of aluminum tape or some Camptown tape, but using a hot air gun on such a small board tends to burn out a lot of other components. So you could easily wind up destroying it, and it's just safer to take your time and very carefully manipulate all the legs of the boards out. That's why I separated the 2 variable resistors that are on the analog sticks themselves, so that I can only work on the 4 legs and the 4 components, and then work on the variable resistors afterwards. Now on this side I remove the main component first and then the resistors, and then on the other side I remove the resistors and then the main component. Just showing you how all of that works out. Okay, so it's slowly getting there. So we're going to work on the back legs now, because the front legs are free. There we go. We just took off the analog stick, and now we got the controllers. I desoldered this so I can actually tilt this and pull out 2 of the legs and work on the 3rd. And you'd think it would just come right out with only 1 leg in there. But that is not always the case. As you'll soon see. What happened here is when I used the desoldering iron, it got a little too hot and I didn't suck it up soon enough, so the solder actually flowed down the leg of the component and then pulled on the opposite side. So I have to get it hot enough to not only liquefy the solder on this side of the board, but also hot enough for the solder on the other side of the board to actually become liquid and free the component. And doing this while trying to keep it aimed at the camera is a biatch. Excuse the pardon the French. And should almost be there right about now here. Almost there. Put a little bit of solder on it. It might help heat it up a little more evenly. Of course, it adds solder back to it, but it will help. Get some of that solder onto the leg. There we go. On the other side of the board, I'm actually using my finger to pull on it a little bit. There it goes. And I just tossed it off. So we got 1 more to go here. If all 3 of them wind up stuck, and your soldering iron's wide enough, you can cross over 2 component legs at one time, and then use the heat of the soldering iron to allow you to use your finger to pull them first 2 out, and you'll just slowly rock the component back and forth, heating up 2 legs, releasing it, allowing it to cool, turn it around, heat up the 2 legs, raise it up, basically just slowly rocking it back and forth. Now, I could have just put a big blob of solder across all of them, heated them all up and released it that way, but I don't like wasting that much. Creates a lot of lead fumes, which are bad for you, so don't really like doing that. A little bit of solder flux will definitely help transfer the heat from the soldering iron into the solder. that always helps when removing or putting on components. And I'm going to try to get a little bit more of that solder out of that hole. Got two of the legs free, so I pulled the two legs out, gave it a slight twist off to the left or right, it doesn't really matter. And now all I really need to do is heat up the one leg, and pop goes the weasel. It's out. Okay, so we got that one completely off. Time to work on the other side. The other side, I decided to remove the resistors first, and then the analog stick. Although I'm zooming in a little bit, you're not going to be able to see it very well either way. But you really don't need to be so close that you see the solder turn to liquid. I mean, if you can't figure out which pins you need to desolder on this, you really shouldn't be doing this anyway. So I'm not real too concerned about it being absolutely in focus and showing every last absolute detail, because trust me, if you can't figure out which pins you need to remove or desolder in order to remove this component just by looking at it, you are in no way capable of doing this. So don't even bother trying. Alright. I do a lot of micro soldering, and as you can see, this is time consuming work. It's not easy. You got multiple pins. Anytime you have a component with multiple pins that's got to be desoldered, it's usually a pain in the butt. Okay, especially when they have a large metal housing with large component legs. That makes it even worse, because in order for the solder to liquefy, the housing has to get hot enough to allow the leg to get hot enough to allow the solder to get hot enough to melt. So that component on the outside gets very hot, and it's really hard to hold your component and even the circuit board, because it tends to get rather hot too. Okay, so right now I'm just removing the solder. I'll hold it in a little bit of an angle until I see the solder turn to a liquid, and then I'll tilt it up, pull the trigger, suck the solder off, give it a little swirly turn at the same time I do that, and usually that will remove all of the solder and the component will just fall right out. But it does not always work, especially on these boards. I don't know if they're using an extra high temperature solder for these boards or what, but more often than not they're a real pain in the butt. And yes, I did burn myself a couple of times doing this. Just trying to keep everything in view of the screen. There's a couple of times where I didn't realize I was facing it away from the camera, and I apologize for that. But again, you don't need to see every last aspect. You just need to know how long it's going to take and what you're getting into before you do it. Okay, so I wanted to make this video basically uncut and unedited, with the exception of when I had to take a break. So if you see a little edit where it jumps from one spot to another, that's where I went to go take the break. I think I took my first break about 8 minutes into it, and I did about maybe 2 or 3 minutes. I had to stop for the wife, go do something, and then say after we're about 10 minutes into the video, all the way to about, I don't know, almost 50 minutes into it, break free, just continuously desoldering the iron, desoldering it. So a good 40 minutes of removing just these components. You know how hard it is to sit here and think up stuff to say when you're narrating a video that's this long? Seriously. Yeah, but yeah, it's a pain. You just gotta slowly work the component legs out of the slots without burning up your contacts. My soldering iron is set a little lower than normal so that I won't burn up the solder contacts. I know some people like to have them on full blast all the time, but if they run into a problem, they will turn their circuit board, they'll basically cook the contact right off of the board. All of that copper is glued in place to the circuit board with that green coating that prevents corrosion over the top of everything else. So if your soldering iron is too hot, when you go to desolder it, it will actually get so hot it will release the glue that holds that contact down, and then you have a major problem. So I do work with the soldering iron at pretty much its lowest possible temperature for the solder work, so that I don't burn off the contact. So it does take a little bit longer to do it that way, but it's much safer, especially when you're working on a customer's electronic. I've had people bring me stuff that they had other people around here repair, and I hate even opening them up, because I'll open them up and then I got to show them, hey, look, this is what that guy did, and this is why it's not repairable. This is why he didn't repair it, because he destroyed it trying to desolder it with his soldering iron on full blast, and burned off all the contacts, or knocked off the components, or tried to use a heat gun to heat up the entire board to remove the component, and then other components fell off or failed. So, and you know, this is another reason why I don't like doing these, because I charged $30 to replace both of the analog sticks. That's pretty much a flat rate, and considering it took me an hour plus my breaks, actually an hour and probably 15 minutes plus my breaks to do this, I'm actually losing money. So usually only do this whenever I'm going to have a slow spot, and I tell them as long as you're not in a hurry and all that other good stuff, then I'll do it. But usually it's faster and easier just to buy another controller. $10–20 more and you can buy a brand new controller from China. Let's face facts, they all come from China anyway, so who cares if it comes from China? You know, it ain't like it's made here in the US. Microsoft don't make them here in the US. It's all out from China. So anything you get from China is going to be the identical one. Now if you have a special custom controller or something like that, then I can see having it repaired. But then again, most of the controllers are identical with the exception of colors, and you can buy the cheaper one from China and then just remove and put your case on it, unless of course again you have customizations on it, or it came a little bit custom with buttons in slightly different locations which wouldn't allow you to do something like that. Anyhow, we're working here, we're slowly manipulating the components out. About 37 minutes into the video. Okay, so I'm going to start removing the legs for the analog stick itself. So we're going to get our little spudger in there, which we're going to use as a pry tool. Heat up the solder and slowly and carefully pry the leg out after the solder is heated up. Go to the next leg, we'll do the same thing. And then I'm going to go to the little pick tool, which is a little bit fatter, and do it again. Slowly work the legs out. Okay, so if anybody posts anything saying, oh my god, he slipped and all this other stuff, hey, that's a fact of life. So I don't want to hear, I won't even argue that point with anybody. I'll just delete the comment because I know what I do. I know the truth. I actually have schooling in component level electronics. I actually have on-the-job experience with component level electronics through the military, repairing all the flight navigation, weapon stability platforms, onboard computers for all the helicopters. So anybody posting any crap otherwise or trying to talk shit on my repairs can quite frankly just do so elsewhere, and those who insist on talking crap on my channel, I just ban them after a while, because there's a lot of repairmen out there that don't like the fact that I talk about the repairs, don't like the fact that I showed everybody about the X clamps and the bolts, and it made it harder for them to steal money from children doing fake repairs. So are we having fun yet? Gonna get in here, we're gonna pull that leg out a little better, a little bit more. twist. And slowly pry them legs out. Now it may look like I'm doing this hard, but I'm doing it very, very gentle, taking my time. I'm not prying like I'm trying to break into a car or anything. It's just very gentle manipulation of the legs. Sometimes it helps transfer heat. You'll get a black buildup of carbon on your soldering iron. Clean it off from time to time, and it really helps matters. Also, if you keep the soldering iron wicked, in other words with solder on it, that also helps transfer the heat from the tip to the leg of the component that you're trying to remove. And a little bit of flux on it from time to time also helps. I think we got the front legs pretty much up high enough to start working on the 4 pins of the analog stick itself. That's actually part of the electronic portion of it that needs to be removed, along with the 4 housing legs, which is what makes this such a pain in the butt repair. So now I'm going to switch over to the fat side of this so I can get a little bit more of a pry. And I'm going to try and get a little bit toward the back of the component so I can pull the back legs out a bit. Sorry you can't see anything at the moment. I realized I was blocking it here, and then I'll switch positions to kind of help you see what's going on. Component's just about off. Got a little bit of manipulating left to do. Sorry you can't see what I'm doing behind my hand, but basically I'm just trying to find a good spot to get a little bit of a pry going on to the legs, so that once I heat them up I can slowly pull the leg of the component out and then move to the next one. Slowly pull the leg of that component out, move to the next one, slowly pull the leg of that component out, move to the next one, slowly pull the leg of that component out, until I get all of the leg components completely out of the circuit board without damaging anything. Okay, so we're about 45 minutes into this. About an hour counting my breaks. And in just a little while here I'll actually let you know when I took another break. Coming up in a few minutes here. I think pretty much as soon as I get this component off, I took a break. Alright, so we're going to very carefully the last leg of this thing off here. Heat up the leg from the opposite side a little bit. Should help me get that last bit out. I dropped it. Okay. Just about there. I think I got one leg left to pull out. Get this situated. Pop goes the weasel. Right about here-ish. I think right now I'm using a pair of tweezers that's got an angle on them. Yeah, I'm using my dental tweezers. They have like an angle on them. There we go. Off. Very handy tools when it comes to electronics, especially the tiny ones. Get a dentist pick and tweezers, and that goes. Okay, so just past the point where I took a break, you might have noticed a slight glitch in the film. That's where I went and took a break and then came back. So we got all the components we need off. We're going to clean up all the flux, get the board ready, and set up to install the new components. And yes, cleanup is necessary. Please don't just leave that stuff all slathered all over it. Nasty stuff become corrosive over time, and when and if it gets contaminated with dust, can actually become electrically conductive and cause your controllers to start walking again, even though the controller's not even bad. Right here, some of the components holes are going to be full of solder. I'm taking a very tiny soldering drill bit, and I will very carefully make sure every single hole for the legs of these is clear. You got to be real careful to use the right size bit. If you use the wrong size bit, you'll actually cut off the barrel that actually goes through the board that the legs and stuff solder to. But this is just to make it easier, instead of trying to hit every single solder point and try to get the component to go in one leg at a time, which is pretty much impossible. It's best to just go around all of the holes, pick them out with a little tiny drill bit, clean them up so that the component can be installed in one simple motion. Always remove all your little flecks of solder. They might short something out and you don't want that. Okay, so you line up the component and very gently press it in place. Make sure all the legs go all the way through and you can see all of the legs. Let's get you a little bit of a close-up on that. Okay. I was holding this up a little too high. I apologize for that. Okay, I'm going to get it all lined up, press it into place. Okay, I can see every single leg. Okay, so I'm going to move the camera down, get you a nice close-up of the final soldering. Now, soldering in this angle was a lot more problematic than I even anticipated. But I wanted to show you how to basically solder these back into place. Get your flux, go over all your component legs that you need to. The four large legs for the housing itself, probably best to do them last, and because they require a lot more heat to solder them in place. So it's best if you just quickly solder in all of the legs of these smaller components. Put your soldering iron on and then use the solder. And yeah, that leg didn't work out too well. Probably because I didn't have enough flux on it. I did wind up going back and touching that up later because I got too much solder on it. See that big old blob? That wasn't good. That's what it should look like right there. That's a little bit too much. That's the way it should look. That's the way it should look. That's the way it should look. That's not the greatest, but will do. That's the way it should look. Always heat the component leg and put the solder to the opposite side. That's good. That wasn't the greatest. Good. That worked out good. That worked out good. That worked out perfect. worked out perfect. That worked out perfect. That worked out perfect. You can tell which ones came out really good, which ones didn't. Kind of hard to do this again at this angle while watching the screen. That one came out perfect. That one came out perfect. Notice all the ones that had the proper amount of flux came out perfect. Alright, so at this point we've got all of the component legs soldered in. Now we can work on the component housing legs. The housing legs are what hold it in place nice and solid, so that when you get overzealous trying to turn the corner in your video game, that it doesn't break all the components off the board. So these need to be heated up and soldered in place. Usually takes a little while for the solder or the leg to heat up because of the amount of metal on the other side. But these are not grounding points, so you don't have to really worry too much about a perfect look on them, just so as there's enough solder on there that it doesn't get pulled out and it locks the whole thing in place. And it's not going to easily come free if the guy's a little overzealous on his controller thumbsticks. So you want a decent amount of solder, but you also want it attached to the pad with at least 50% adhesion. Okay, so I'm going to touch this other leg up over here a little bit more. Add a little bit more over here. Add a little bit more over here. I'm going to touch up over here a little bit. Sorry about that. Let me put this camera up a little higher, and then we're going to do some cleanup. Zoom back in here. We're going to do some cleanup. We'll inspect all of the component soldering points. You know, some of them got a little bit more solder on them than I would like them to have, but the adhesion was good, so wasn't no need to take off the excess. Other ones actually touched up. touching up some of the 4 legs of the components, a couple of the other component legs that I want to touch up on, because after cleaning it up with the isopropyl alcohol and a cotton swab, lets you see things that you wouldn't normally see otherwise. So I'm going to clean up all of the solder contacts that look questionable. The last thing you want to do is get this thing all put together and then find out, hey, it don't work. Okay, about another 30 seconds or so. I'd take another break. But yeah, just touching up solder that needs to be cleaned up. And again, sometimes you get a little bit more solder than you need on a spot, as long as you can see that the contact to the leg of the component and the contact to the board itself is good, and it really won't matter if you have a little bit more than you need and have more of a mound, as long as, again, the solder is visibly attached to the circuit trace. You can remove some of the solder and then retouch it if you have a little bit of an issue with too much solder, but it's not necessary as long as now if there's any question in your mind whatsoever as to whether or not the component is properly or very well soldered to the trace itself, then yes, absolutely remove the excess solder and then reheat it so that you can see that everything is in place. Now, should all of your welds look like some of them that you've seen on there that had a little bit too much solder on it? No. You should strive for perfection on your soldering, because if the solder weld looks perfect, like as if it came from the factory, you know for a fact it's done right, and you know for a fact you're not going to have to come back. Okay, so we're going to put this together, get the this is kind of a little on the rough side. You got to get this in place, then you got to be real careful. You got to thread this little ribbon cable back through the little spot in the housing, and then once you get that lined up, then it'll all pretty much settle into place. You'll have a little bit of an issue with the back side flattening out at first, but a little jiggle, a little wiggle, and it will settle into place just nice and sweet, just like that. And check all your buttons, make sure none of them fell out. If they did, separate it, start over. Okay, so at this point we're good to go to put the screw back in place. And you'll notice I haven't soldered in the rumblers yet. Not necessary to solder them in advance. It's much better and easier if the controller is already put together, so that nothing's all wiggling and wobbling around. Now you're also going to have to remember, and you might have to refer back to your picture about what color, whether it was red at the top or black at the bottom, or black at the bottom or red at the top, because these actually cross. On one side it'll be red positive, black negative. On the other side it'll be black positive, red negative. So make sure you get them back in the way they were on the right sides. Now, will it make much of a difference if you reversed them? Probably not. I haven't tested the theory. it would reverse the direction of travel for the rumbler, and I would think that it wouldn't make any difference one way or another, but some motors run better in one direction than the other, and I don't know if these motors are the specific type. Some motors will only run in one direction, so I'm not going to bother looking them up or trying to decide whether or not it is. All I know is I'm going to put it back exactly the way it came off. That way I know it will work exactly the way it's supposed to, because it's exactly the way it was. Okay, we got the black one on. Put the red one on.
Justin, you get a blueberry muffin.
Put the soldering iron to the top side of the wire, and then push it down. That will melt into the solder and allow the wire to solder into place. This was a bad angle, so kind of turn the tweezers, get a better grab, and watch. Put the wire on the pad, put the soldering iron on the wire on the pad, and then that will allow it to melt the solder on the pad, allow the wire to sink into the solder, touch the pad itself, and then dry. Well, not really dry, but cool. Alright, so touch the wire with the iron and allow it to sink, and then you're good to go. See, black, red, red, black. That's the way it was, that's the way it should be. If you reverse them, then good luck. Okay, so this has been one very long and very boring video. Sometimes it takes a long time to fix things. That's why most people, especially if they're licensed, are not going to repair it for $10. Okay, the only people that repair stuff like this for $10 is a teenager. So you get what you pay for. If that teenager destroys it and you bring it into a licensed shop and they tell you they're not going to repair it, it's not that it's not repairable, it's that it's too time consuming, and what they would charge you would be more than it's worth to buy a new one, which means it's not repairable. Okay? Anything's repairable. If you replace the circuit board or replace the inners, replace everything, replace the whole thing, and just put the outer shell back on, that's considered a repair. So basically anything is repairable. It's whether or not it's worth the money and time and expense of actually repairing it. So you have to kind of juggle that conundrum. Alright, so stick the lower half on feet first, and then once you get it manipulated into place, there you go, pull the triggers back, insert them into the housing, and then with a nice quick squeeze, being very careful not to break your triggers, that thing will go right back together, and then we put in the final 4 screws. Okay, so again, I'd like to invite you to my giveaways. Check out my sponsorship, or excuse me, my member video. It talks about how to get extra entries and my giveaways. Check out, see what I'm giving away, even if you don't want to get in on any of them. Stop by, check them out, see if there's anything you like. Hey, you never know. Okay, so this particular controller would not turn on, so I had to go get a USB charger, and then after a few minutes of charging, it just turned right on, so didn't have to open it back up. This is the first one I'm repaired here in just a second, so yeah, just checking all the buttons and controller. It wouldn't fire up. Anytime you press the PS button, you should get a light that blinks letting you know that it's ready and looking for the system. This one wouldn't do it, so I went and got a charger, and you'll see here in a second. There you go, I'm back after letting it charge for a little while. Unplug it, press the button, and voila, she's blinking, so everything's good on that. Just go check it out on a game system and make sure everything's working fine. I'm done. Now we need to clean up a little bit. So I'm gonna let this run here while I clean it up a little bit and then let you go. Stay safe, happy gaming everybody, and again, check out my active giveaways. Refer your friends over, let them see it. If you don't want anything, maybe your friends do. You don't have to go to Twitter, you don't have to go to Facebook, you don't have to like or subscribe. Just post a comment in the video of whatever you want to win, and you're automatically entered. If you'd like to get entries in everything I give away, you can advertise the channel. I'll give you one entry in everything I give away until the day you remove that, or until I quit giving stuff away. If you want additional entries, check out becoming a member of the honorary member of the HGC by supporting my giveaways and helping me give away more, and I'll explain that on the video, so just go check them out. And yeah, that was one very long, one very boring video, but I wanted to show you that these repairs are not always what they seem. They're a lot harder than they look majority of the time. It's not always easy peasy like what the videos show. So just wanted to show you that. Stay safe, happy gaming everybody. Bye.